Um, my name is B. Chatfield, and just as you may have just noted, this meeting is being recorded so that we can post it on the Parks Department website to share it with those people who are unable to attend the meeting tonight. I hope you are comfortable with that. If not, you can leave your camera off. I am a project manager from Boston Parks and Recreation, and I wanted to welcome you tonight on behalf of Parks and BPDA. We are here co-hosting this meeting to discuss the planning of open space in the Sullivan Square area of Charlestown, with a focus on Ryan Playground, Hood Green, and the new open space in Sullivan Square that will be resulting from the Rutherford Avenue renovation. If we could start the presentation, the visuals, that would be great. Gracie, if you could cue that up. Awesome, thank you. So here we are welcoming everybody. And then if we could flick to the next slide. Most of you at this point, many of you have attended Zoom meetings, but there may be some of you who are not familiar with the processes. And so we have included a slide that includes a few basic functions. If we can flick to the agenda on the next page, I'm just giving you a heads up. We will share our presentation during the first half of tonight's meeting. And then the second half is really dedicated to a live discussion where we'd like to hear your thoughts on what programs should happen at these 3 sites. During our presentation, please either hold your questions and then share them during the discussion, or post them in the chat so that we can address them afterwards. And during the end of our presentation, we're going to have a short live polling session also. That's item number 2, presentation and live polling, to spark some ideas for our discussion. There are a lot of presentations tonight. We're going to cover a lot of ground. We really want everybody to be thinking about programming. What activities do you want to do in these 3 sites? So instead of doing a lengthy introduction now, I just want to say thank you to all of the design teams and agencies that worked together tonight, put a lot of effort into tonight's meeting to try and communicate as best as possible with you, the community of Charlestown. So whoever is doing their presentation portion, please introduce yourselves. I'm not going to do a lengthy intro right now. And right now I am going to hand it off to Jay Ruggiero of the BPDA. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, B. Next slide, please. So good evening. For those who don't know me, my name is Jay Ruggiero. I'm a community engagement manager at the BPDA, the Boston Planning and Development Agency. And as B alluded to, so we have a packed house, right? A team with you this evening from the city. So we are really excited to be with you all. Tonight is a deliberate and intentional step to bring a lot of people from the city together to talk to you. So tonight's, we heard loud and clear as we launched Plan Charlestown maybe a little over a year ago, that the community really wanted to see collaborative and holistic and really kind of a real kind of collaborative planning process when we think about things like open space and transportation and housing and things like that. So that is kind of what we're doing here tonight. So we're going to be talking about open space, and you, the community, are going to be the ones using that open space. So we want to know how you would be activating or using that space. So when we talk about Ryan Playground or Sullivan Square or Hood Green, we want to be thinking of this collaboratively, holistically. So we're activating, programming our open space to be what the community wants it to be. So B is here representing the Parks Department. Bill Connery is here representing the Transportation Department. Mark Rosenshine is here representing Hood Park. And I just want to also acknowledge our friends in the Environment Department. So Climate Ready Boston is also ongoing, and the Environment Department is with us also here tonight. So again, you're going to hear from a lot of people tonight. I'm going to pass it to my colleague, Kelly Sherman of the BPDA. But we just want to thank all of you for being a part of this process and being with us this evening. So one more thing before I kick it to Kelly. So we introduced some of us, but we want to know who's with us a little bit tonight too. So we're just going to have a kind of an introduction poll. So we can launch that poll real quick. If everyone just wants to answer 3 quick questions, that'd be really helpful. So have you attended other city open space meetings before? A lot of people saying, no, this is my first meeting on open space. That's a good thing. We're happy you're with us tonight. We hope you continue to be a part of this process. There's a lot of things happening in Charlestown, as I mentioned. There's this process on open space. There's the Climate Ready Boston process that focuses on climate resilience work. And there's also Plan Charlestown, which is the neighborhood-wide comprehensive planning initiative underway. So if this is your first meeting, it looks like 43% of the people here tonight, this is their first meeting. So that's a good thing. We hope you remain a part of this process. Do we have another question? So if you go to the tab, you can click question 2. Okay, good. Yeah. Which of these user groups do you most identify with? Are you a local resident, commuter? Do you just work in Charlestown? Do you just shop and enjoy the restaurants and shops? Do you just go to the parks? Similar question, you just bring your dogs to the parks or maybe other? Just trying to see who's with us tonight that might be using or activating the open spaces. So. All right, that's good. Almost 60% of the people here tonight are local residents. A little over 20% are professionals. That's good. Then other. All right, just one more question. How do you typically get to the greater Sullivan Square area? So do you take the T? Do you typically walk there? Do you drive, bike, or other? Okay, so almost half the people walk. That's great. About 40% drive, 25, 26% bike, and about 17% take the MBTA. Okay, that's great. All right, so with that, I will pass it to my colleague Kelly Sherman of the BPDA. And again, thank you so much for being with us. Next slide.
Thanks, Jay. Hi, everyone. My name's Kelly Sherman. I'm a downtown and neighborhood planner for Boston Planning Development Agency. And I work on Charlestown for both the neighborhood as a planner and also work on the planning initiative, Plan Charlestown. Today, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some background context so you understand why we're here tonight and what's going on in the area. So next slide, please. So this is a map of Charlestown, as you can tell, and are probably all familiar with, and it shows all of the different green spaces in the area. So just for your kind of understanding, Charlestown has about 3 acres of green space per 1,000 residents, which is actually on the lower side for the city. On average, the city has about 7.6 acres of open space per 1,000 residents. And that number is skewed by some of the other neighborhoods that are further from the core, like West Roxbury or Roslindale. But even so, it's on the lower side. Other neighborhoods that are downtown, like by the core, Beacon Hill has about 4.23 acres. Downtown Crossing, Chinatown, North End, West End have 2.17. So it's on the lower side, but not crazy. But we specifically want to add more green space to this area. And if you can see on this map, the Sullivan Square area kind of has a limited amount of green space. So if you move on to the next slide. We'll be talking about specifically this area tonight, and you can see what green space currently exists within the Sullivan Square area, and you can see that we certainly could use some more. So tonight we'll be talking about a few projects. Next slide. That'll be adding green space into the area. We have a Lion Playground, which already exists. A new parcel created by the realignment of Riverford Ave and Sullivan Square. and also Hood Green, which is coming online thanks to Mark Rosenstein and the Hood project as well. Next slide, please. So when you're thinking about these spaces, we want you to understand how much of this space actually is coming online in terms of size. And so Hood Green is going to be about the size of Winthrop Square, just a little bit bigger. And that's how Winthrop and Hood Green compare to the Charlestown Navy Yard in Bunker Hill Monument. Next slide. Sullivan Square is going to be really similar in size to Menino Park. And also the Edwards Playground, which you can see here. And here's how these things compare to Doherty Playground. Next slide. And finally, here's what Ryan Playground size-wise compares to. Since Ryan Playground already exists, you guys probably have a rough sense of how large that is. But it's similar in size to the Charlestown Community Center / High School and the Charlestown Bunker Hill Community College. Next slide. And so for reference, you have an understanding of roughly the sizes of both parks, but what actually fits inside of it, you can see in this kind of nifty table here. This table explains and is not limited to these uses, but some of the uses that we thought we'd heard in the past that you guys might want to understand about. The sizes of different fields and uses and amenity spaces that might be of interest to you, so you guys can understand how much one site can accommodate and what could kind of puzzle piece fit in. This chart goes from large to small, with the left being on the larger sizes that aren't quite flexible, and on the right they get smaller or completely flexible, and you can determine how large you want them to be. Next slide. So I would be remiss to say that while those uses are helpful, there are climate effects going on right now, specifically flooding, that'll affect all of these sites. So not only do we want these sites to be acting as a benefit to the public and a community use that you can have, we also want these sites to serve for climate resilience purposes. Specifically, Ryan Playground is getting a update because we want to make this area more resilient. Here you can see some of the flood patterns and pathways that are coming down Charlestown in the future. And so just keep in mind that these parks are going to serve dual purposes. Next slide, please. So you don't have to think about these things by yourself. We have other members of the city here also thinking about this all the time. You have my team, Plan Charlestown, and the Boston Planning and Development Agency thinking about what are, I guess, trying to understand what the citizens of Charlestown want to understand and know and have in the future of Charlestown as a whole. Climate Ready Boston is looking at the climate change impacts that are going to happen in Charlestown. They think about flood resiliency, but also heat resiliency as well. And Ryan Playground is helping implement some of these goals and ideas that you wanted to see, and also addressing some of these climate change effects. And so we have parks here as well. And of course, as Jay mentioned, we do have Climate Ready Boston here, and we also have BTD here, and we also have Hood Green here, and we have everyone here. Next slide. We heard from you from some of our past meetings, and we specifically discussed open space in our Plan Charlestown, meetings. We specifically talked about open space in a workshop dedicated to it, as well as climate resilience. We heard other people talk about it in Land Use Through Time Part 2, and we had a mini breakout room during the Planning Places Rutherford Ave and Sullivan Square meeting to discuss what people wanted to see in this area. Next slide. Oh wait, before we switch over, sorry, can you go back one? Thank you. We still want to hear your opinions on all these things. So if you can, and if you're interested in seeing what your community members said, please visit bit.ly at Map Charlestown. It's the bottom link here. And you can still give us feedback because we still want to hear what you want in this area, not just about green space. You can tell us about green space and we'd love to hear it, but also other things as well. All right, next slide, thank you. And so during those meetings that we held with the community during the Plan Charlestown meetings, we heard all of the things. We heard that you wanted more trees, open space, etc. You wanted these open spaces to be safe and accessible, and bring you closer towards the water, which is one of the brilliant assets of Charlestown. We needed these spaces to be climate resilient and ready to go. And we wanted all of these spaces to foster a sense of community. Specifically in terms of uses, people said that they wanted more dog parks and active recreation and a green corridor. Next slide. We also heard from you that you wanted this to be a holistic process, that when we're visioning Charlestown, you want interdepartmental communications, which is why we're all here tonight. And you specifically wanted to see that this was a holistic process, that we weren't divided and that you weren't just having meetings where we weren't conversing with each other. So we're here tonight to all kind of be on the same page and have an understanding of what you want. And so we specifically are going to hear from 3 different groups. We're going to hear from First Parks, and we're going to be discussing Ryan Playground. We're going to hear from Brown, Richardson, and Rowe, who are going to be discussing the Sullivan Square new parcel. And we're also going to be hearing from Mark Rosenstein about Hood Green. Specifically, when we're thinking about these sites, they're going to tell you information about it, but we want to hear back from you what you want to use each site for. And we want you to understand, kind of think about these spaces in terms of the opportunities and challenges associated with each individual site, how those sites relate to each other in this green corridor that we are now creating, and also how it fits the needs of Charlestown Park space as a whole. And so I'm going to kick it off first to Brandon Kunkel from Weston Sampson to talk about the uses potentially on Ryan Playground and some of the site considerations. So next slide, and I'll pass it off to you, Brandon.
All right. Thank you so much, Kelly, and everyone else on this meeting. It's great to be here tonight, and thank you for taking time out of your busy lives and evening to join us. As other folks have already mentioned, this is very important to us, and not just from our side of the equation, but from all the other designers on this call. We want to make sure that we're providing Charlestown with the most effective and most efficient open spaces that would be heavily used and endorsed and loved going into the future. So Ryan Playground specifically is probably one of the larger open spaces, if not the largest open space beyond Bunker Hill Community College within Charlestown. It's about 8.75 acres. And just to back up a little bit here, looking at the schedule. So we met with you folks last month, specifically for Ryan. We had our first kickoff meeting with the community, and it was great. Thank you for those who were able to attend. And if we have some repeat attendees tonight, that's even better. So here we are tonight with the larger group and the 3 projects that we're speaking of. And then we'll be back in front of the community again in December for our second community meeting, where we'll be presenting concepts for Ryan Playground and getting feedback on that. So we're hoping that between the September meeting and tonight's meeting, we get some really great feedback and direction for Ryan Playground specifically. And then we'll be presenting finally in January, would be considered the preferred schematic design for Ryan Playground. And then we'll immediately push forward with documentation and getting up to a permitting level documents for spring 2022. And then as we work through all the permitting, and then ultimately we hope to begin construction somewhere in fall 2022. Next slide, please. So this is a slide that we showed last month, but it's basically, we have been to Ryan Playground several times now, and we'll continue to be there with you folks as we get feedback. But this is sort of what we're up against. We've done a site analysis throughout the site. We've evaluated it. from an environmental standpoint, from a resiliency standpoint, from the vulnerability perspective, shade perspective, the health of the trees, the relationship to Alfred Street and the Shrath City Center, the relationship to the water, and circulation in the park, in and out of the park. So all these assessments are going on. They're always ongoing until we get to a final design. But they're all very important. And we'll be looking also at the shade and resilience of urban heat island as we move through the design process as well. One thing to note, and B reminded me earlier in the day, just to make note that the Flatley Company, who is owners of the Shrath City Center building, recently released their vision for their parcel, which is adjacent to Ryan Playground. We've already had several conversations with them, and so we'll be also coordinating with them as they move forward in their design process, so that all of these various projects are in coordination with each other. Next slide. As it was mentioned earlier, we are working with Climate Ready Boston, and we are continuing to study the flood risks as we'll work through the design. As you can see here, specifically on this slide, Ryan Playground, the Sullivan Square, and the Hood Green properties are all very critical and right in the pathway of a major flood pathway into Charlestown. So we hope collaboratively between all three of these projects, we're able to resolve that. Next slide. For Ryan, we've already started looking at the key elements, and you have a playground. There's a support building, concessions building. There's edges along Alfred Street. There's shade structures and walkways within the park itself. There's athletic fields. There's a skating rink. And then there's the boardwalk and the water's edge along the Mystic River. Next slide, please. And I will hand it over to the folks from Brown, Richardson, and Rowe.
Thank you very much. This is Allison Richardson, landscape architect with Brown, Richardson, and Rowe. We're working with Tetra Tech on the Rutherford Avenue reconstruction. And the new open space at Sullivan Square is at the centerpiece of the open space that will be created by this project. And next slide. This is shows the extent of the Rutherford Avenue and Sullivan Square project, which is really a large project. Some of you may have been to earlier meetings. It goes all the way from City Square Park to the water, to the bridge. And you can see toward the right, there's the new Sullivan Square is this dashed in white, is the part of the project that we will be talking about tonight. Next slide. Basically the schedule, it's a long schedule because it's a large project. It's an 18-month design schedule, which we're just beginning, and then pretty much a 4-year construction schedule. So we will start construction quite a bit after Ryan, and actually the same time frame as Hood Green, which you will see later in the presentation. Next. So this is a slide that shows some historic photographs of what this area looked like at the turn of the century and to about 1950s, 60s. There was the Sullivan Square train station. That was the terminus of the L from the city. And next to the train station, there was a really quite lovely, you can see the bottom left photo, a lovely traditional park of trees and lawn, and there was a fountain in the middle of a circular pathways, and it was really quite lovely and was lost. So one of the great things about Rutherford Avenue reconstruction is the ability to find this and remake this space that was lost in a car, and now will be available to people and bikes and everybody. And that's one of the things that's very exciting. Another thing I want to say, that you can see that the New Sullivan Square Park is right in the middle between Hood Green and Rutherford Avenue, which will have other open spaces to the left, to Boston area, and Ryan. So circulation of pedestrians and bicycles, and of course the cars on the outside, is really critical. We really thought very, very long and hard about how to make it clear and safe. And that's going to be one of the big challenges. And also to make the park kind of a serene space that is surrounded in three sides by the car. Next slide. And this is the next slide. Wait, before you go to the next slide, go back for a minute. The next slide shows an animation of the circulation, and the beginning it actually moves. The beginning is the pedestrian connections between the three open spaces, then the bike trail connections in sort of a blue-green, and then the last is sort of a more finely detailed, just purely pedestrian connections within the parks themselves. Okay, next. So this is the connection of the green spaces. The Ryan and the New Sullivan and Hood Green. Now we have our bikes. You see those right through the park. So I guess this is the pedestrian again. So it's very important that this little park in between these other greens. So we can go on to the next slide. So the challenges and opportunities of this park, this new park, is to be safe, to have clear circulation, to allow for all kinds of uses, passive and active, incorporate climate resilient designs. What does that mean? That means lots of trees and grass and permeable paving and considerations of drainage, et cetera. And then also there's a potential in this park, I think, for possibly some food and entertainment. Because it is right in the middle of sort of the hubbub of activity, and the potential for some very special garden elements that could distinguish it from Hood Green and from Ryan. It's not very large. It's sort of almost 1 1/3 acres, but it is large enough to really be a real place. And that's what we're going to try to make it a really very special new park. Next. So here is a close-up of the park, and you can see the how close it is to Ryan. It's really just across the street of the new extension of the playground. And the way to get to Hood Green is you just would go down Rutherford and then cross the street, the Rutherford Avenue over the overpass there. And so everything's very close, very, very close, a minute or two away. And the park is large enough so that it can have multiple places. It can have an open lawn, it can have a terrace for seating, or it could have a little tot lot, and lots of trees and flowers, and it could have food trucks, it could have a concession stand. There's lots of ideas that could happen here. And I always sort of think a little bit that it's a little bit like Post Office Square, because the development parcel, which is up to the upper right, looks right down on this, very similar to the telephone building that looks down onto PO Square, and there is a street in between that. And so there's going to be a lot happening in this area, and it will really be all open up to people with bikes and kids and teenagers and old people and everything, all kinds of people, and the cars will be on the outside, not in the middle. Next.
Good evening. My name is Mark Rosenshine. I'm Owner's Project Manager for Trademark Partners, and I'll start by apologizing for any background noise. I'm doing this presentation from the airport. I'm joined by Kate Keenan with Offshoots and James Rowe from Copley Wolf, our team of landscape architects and designers. Next slide, please. And for those of you that are not familiar, Hood Green, which is the area highlighted here, is a little over an acre area committed to public open space as part of the Hood Park master plan, which incorporates approximately 20 acres, which you see here on the screen now. This isn't the only open space we have. We've actually finished a new spray ground and 6 Stack Street, which you see in the upper left-hand corner, which is a new open space and phytoremediation.
Hi, everyone. Did we have Mark freeze?
Yes, he did.
I think that I will pull into Mark's spot here since Mark is at the airport. I'm going to try to help. So as Mark mentioned, I'm Kate Kennan from Offshoots. We are the landscape architects working with Copley Wolf Design Group as well on the Hood Green project. So I'll kind of fill in here for Mark. So as Mark was mentioning, he was talking about the 6 Stack project and the other open space projects that have happened over in the Hood Park development. And now we're really excited about the Hood Green project, which is about a 1 acre open space that will come online about the same time that the Rutherford Ave project will come online. Next slide, please. So the timeline for this project, like we mentioned, is about, it's a little further off, more closer to the new Sullivan Square open space project that will start the design process, obviously today, hearing ideas about programming and what would be required. But what we would also try to do is that we would look to get into a more detailed design process about 2 years or so before the final Rutherford Ave project is constructed. Next slide, please.
Sorry, Kate, for 1 second. When you speak, you're fading in and out, I think. So if you could stay close to your mic, that would be awesome. Thank you.
I'm going to try this. I'm going to take off my headphones. How's that? Better. Okay. Sorry, guys. We're having all kinds of technical difficulties tonight. It's just our jam today. So it's all good. Here is a view of the Hood Green project of what was done in the early master planning process when the Hood Park was brought to look at. In the background here, you see the potential new hotel that would be going in behind the green. And on the front side, this is viewing from Rutherford Ave at a new retail space that would be fronting the Rutherford Ave project, about a 1-story retail space. And behind that, the 1 acre green space that would be available for the community. Next slide, please. And here's a view from on top of that 1-story retail space. The idea here is that it would be an occupiable green roof that one could sit on, and you could actually overlook that 1 acre green space. And of course, this is showing it as a flat non-program space, but that's what we're here to talk to the community about what you would envision as program there. Next slide. What we love about the opportunity here with utilizing the green roof on top of the retail is that we could have events or music or even a sledding hill in the winter, picnicking, all sorts of things to take advantage of that westerly view occupying the top of that space. On the next slide, please. And so when we start to think about this from a site analysis point of view, Hood Green here is again shown in yellow. One thing that's a little different about our site than the other open spaces is that we're within the air pollution particulate zone, again, from 93 in the highway. So we know we have to be careful, and that kind of air pollution, the zone that the particulate, both fine and large particles, would travel from the highway, touches the back corner of our site. We have to be really careful and think about that. But then also we have to think about noise pollution that comes from, you know, the T behind and the highway behind, and also the visual pollution as well. So that's something we're really going to be considering. And then the last slide on Hood Green. And then when we zoom into the site, this is a site analysis of the project. And you can see the green space is really what we're talking about. The future retail space on the front side is not really in the actual Hood Green portion of the project, but like we said, the open space would ideally flow into the rest of the green space. What's shown in pink here are the desire lines for both bicycles and pedestrians. We very much envision a shared use path that would be on the north side or D Street side of the site that would go along the edge of D Street to connect Rutherford Ave back to the back of Hood Park. We also are very much going to be considering climate change here by elevating all of Hood Park. SOHAR is actually preparing for sea level rise and elevating it out of the floodplain. So we would be doing the same thing with this particular park. And you can very much see how the future retail fronts Rutherford Ave and the future hotel is on the left-hand side. So we're really excited. This has great solar orientation for the community. We think it is an incredible resource for as a new open space for Charlestown residents. So we're excited to hear everyone's ideas today. There was actually a quick question about what the yellow sun line was too. That just shows the basically the sun orientation that would start on the right-hand side on the east and come over to the west as the sun sets in the west. What we really love here is this opportunity about pretty incredible views for those of you who've been out in this area. The sunsets and the views to the west, maybe even when on top of that future retail space, could be very nice. Next slide.
Okay, thank you so much, Kate. And thank you so much to Brown Richardson Rowe and the BTD project. I think we're going to try some live polling now. And the idea behind this is to have everybody give, have a chance to share whatever your initial thoughts are. If you don't have any initial thoughts, that's totally fine. We're just trying to sort of like loosen up and come up with some ideas here so that when we get to the portion of the meeting tonight where we're having our discussion and conversation, these are some topics that we can pick up on. So if we can go to the next slide. This is a program that we're using, which is called Slido. And you can either use your phone or open up a page in the web browser. And there is a code here. You either go slido.com/openspace or open a page in your web browser on your computer and enter the code openspace. And go to the next slide, trying to give everybody a chance to do this slowly and figure it out as you go if you haven't done this before. So you can also scan the QR code in the upper left corner of the screen if you're like, wait, I missed that. We're going to start off here. And what do you enjoy doing in public open spaces that could occur either at Hood Green or Ryan Playground or the Sullivan Square site? Choose all that apply. Whoa, cool. Got some responses. And we're going to keep this up for a little while because, as you know, like the first person who responds shows up as like 100% of the respondees. And we have 63 people at this point in the meeting. So people love events and performances. That is pretty standard throughout our park system. It's like, that's what people want, is like activation of public spaces. So we get that and we hear that. So walking or jogging, that's another super popular use. Public art, picnicking, food related things, that's definitely something that people enjoy doing in our public spaces. And we've got events and performances still in first place here. We've got some stationary fitness, such as like yoga classes or something where you're not like sprinting all over the place or playing baseball, but just getting in shape with the group. Farmers market or food trucks. Dog walking is not anything yet, but picnicking, walking, jogging. Okay, so we've got a lot of support for events and public spaces. A little bit of street hockey, splash pad, water play. Yeah, so there's a lot of responses here, and this is fantastic information. Playing at the playground, some basketball, some court sports, some skateboarding. All right, and let's scroll up to the top so that we can see number 1, events and performances. Okay. Noted. Awesome. Let's go on to the next one. All right. Now this is the kind of thing, it's kind of fun. It's called a word cloud. And basically you have to respond in one word. And so if you have multiple words that formulate your thought, just write it all as one. One word to describe what activity Ryan Playground is uniquely suited for. Sports. Yes, we hear that loudly. Water access. Kites. Yes, I love the kites idea. We'll make sure there are no exposed power lines there for kites. Water access, floodproofing. Totally agree with the floodproofing. That is really first on our list of things that we have to address at Ryan Playground. And we've heard a lot from the community already from our Ryan Playground survey about sports and how important that is to them. So we've got softball, we've got kid-friendly. We've definitely heard a lot as well about the playground there, the kids' playground. So we're certainly going to be providing renovation for that. Outdoor recreation, absolutely. This is a great site for, you know, a hiking path. We've got great bird viewing. We're right here on the river. Softball, kites, activity views. All right, so we've got some fantastic connection. Maybe that's regional connections, or maybe that's connections within your community. You know, both of them are true. Not parking. All right, I like the use of that one word, not parking. So that made it in. Trees, totally doing trees. All right, let's move on to the next site. We've got one word to describe what activity Sullivan Square might be uniquely suited for. So let's think about this again, right? It's gonna be one word cloud. And this is going to be our site. It's a little larger than an acre. I think it was 1.25 acres. Right in the middle of these two other open spaces. We've got bike access that's gonna happen there. We've got cars accessing there. And so what do you think that would be good? Would it serve to link these two sites? Transportation, yes, we've got that. Food, oasis, green, right? Like a nice break from driving your car. You look over, you're like, oh, I wish I could get out of my car and hang out in this park. Green space, traversing, right? So you're talking about connections there. Oasis and transportation, these are really I like those two concepts together in the same thing. We've got pedestrian safety, beauty, food, gateway icon. Yes, I like this. A lunch break, performance. So there's a little bit of like entertainment and event space there too, perhaps. Climate resilience, absolutely. Check plus. Meeting friends, green space, green connections. All right, so we've got some great ideas there. So how about let's shift over. Next slide, we've got the hood green, one word to describe what activity hood green might be uniquely suited for. So let's start populating this. I'm really curious. We've got this very fascinating site where we've got like retail on the front, and then we've got a large building at the back. It's right near the road, you know, with access to the road, but it's not going to have a view of the road because you're going to be, you know, having this retail situation below you. And right now we've got gathering and community. Those are the largest groups of respondents. We've got movies. Ooh, an outdoor movie night there would be pretty cool. Performance, people watching, absolutely. Road buffer, climate resilience, green space, quiet space. I like that idea. So we've got a lot of people responding, gathering and community. So that's great. You know, this is it's a smaller scale space, and it's sort of nestled in within this development. So I think there's just some great ideas, lots of trees, awesome, calm, people watching, possibility for tennis. So some people are considering some smaller scale active recreation. That's exciting. You know, maybe there's room for smaller scale active rec. I don't know, maybe there's like table tennis or something like that, or maybe it's appropriate for a tennis court. That's a great idea. And I like that everybody's badminton. Yeah, some more racket sports. We've got a good racket crew here tonight. All right, calm, gathering, and community. So these are great words. We're gonna do, we're still having some responses here, but in order to keep us sort of moving along, we're gonna go to the next slide. What should activities at these three sites be? Related, distinct, or it doesn't matter? And so I'm thinking of an example of related. We're like, okay, I love food and I want all three sites. I want one site to have farmers market. I want another site to have a community garden and another site to have picnic areas. Or maybe you're like, no, let's do food in one thing. Let's do active recreation in another thing. Or maybe you're like, you know what? Okay. So right now we've got fair amount of people who think that they should not be related. They should not be sort of, one theme. And I guess the point here is not that like every single program element would be dedicated to only one thing in the site, but it's just sort of like, if we're choosing a theme, is active recreation that theme, is food that theme, you know, whatever it is, we're curious to hear about it in the discussion that's going to come up next. So it looks like people like the idea of distinct programs. So that's great to hear. Let's flick to the next thing. What would make the difference for you in deciding to go visit these sites? This is like, what's going to get you up and off of your sofa and like getting the kids out the door? You know, what is it? Sufficient shade with seating? You know, are you not going to go somewhere if there is no shade and seating? variety of activities. You got a couple kids, you have to give them something to do. The availability of parking or transit, the availability of services such as drinking fountains or bathrooms. You know, like if you have a small kid who's potty training, you don't want to go anywhere unless you know that you could handle that. Totally fine. Let us know. So other is an option as well. So it looks like so far sufficient shade with seating is really winning out. And availability of services such as drinking fountains. That's great because we're trying to incorporate those in the new spaces that the Parks Department is providing. Some way for people to cool off in the heat, fill up a water bottle, variety of activities for children, right? So maybe we're looking at like different ages on different sites. You know, over here is where the kids that are older could hang out. Over here is where the younger kids could hang out. So some of that is speaking to different possibilities within the same program. So that's great. All right, so it looks like sufficient shade with seating. That's very achievable in all locations. So that's fantastic. Let's go to the next one. Now this is an intense one, and this may be one of those things where it makes an appropriate segue for the open conversation. Is there a primary issue in Charlestown that these sites could address? What would that be? So if you have something that is burning in your mind, post that here, or you can file it away and we can talk about that when we get to the conversation portion. But let's see what people write in the meantime. So this is great. We've got climate change, traffic mitigation, bike transit connections and climate change, flood resiliency, sufficient space for youth sports and activities, more trees. I mean, this is great because I think a lot of these things, green open space, climate resilience, a lot of these things are very easily addressable. Access to nature, safe transit along the river up and down, urban heat island, flood resilience, traffic situation, and the need for more green open space. Traffic safety, yep, we're hearing a lot of that. I mean, it makes sense. You know, we have this large roadway that is being reconfigured so that there will be some safe pedestrian crossings in it, but it still is going to be a reality. There's still going to be a roadway there. Welcoming and comfortable pedestrian connections, calm open space. All right, the proposed development of Sullivan Square area to add large office retail will require a lot of green space. Not clear this will increase Charlestown's ratio of green space to 1,000 residents. That's a good point. We could talk about that. Stormwater cleansing from roads. All right, so let's keep moving on to the next slide, which I think is basically just, we're going to open up the conversation at this point. We're showing you this aerial photo just to sort of jog your memory of these three spaces and how close they are to each other. The new street alignment, street that goes underneath Sullivan Square, but then also around it, Ryan Playground, Hood Green. And yeah, we're eager and interested to hear your thoughts.
If you want to just raise your hand, I will unmute you.
Thank you, Christine.
No problem. Joanna, you can unmute yourself.
Hi, I think this is very exciting to see all the potential here. One of the other things, though, I keep thinking back of my mind is there, we haven't had a survey of, I don't know how many parents are on this and how many have, you know, people who have kids with sports, but when at the Ryan Playground meeting, one of the things I heard was about soccer and how big that program has grown and how there's no real enough space for that. And someone brought up that we should be looking, or at least understand what the needs are across the community for like sports things. I mean, I think this is great for us to generate that, but I think it would also be good to do a more analytical survey to see if there is need for some of these sport activities. The other thing is, I don't know if the city is still planning on relocating the community center, and how does that fit into this? Here we are talking about all these wonderful activities, but if there was a community space center, maybe not necessarily on these parcels, but on one of the other parcels that become available from the reconfiguration of Sullivan Square, how would that relate to this, to these spaces? So I don't know the answer to all of that, but I feel as we go along with this process, I'm starting to see things, the puzzle pieces on the table, and that they can be starting to move together on this. And it could be very exciting if we really looked at it, which you're trying to do holistically, but I'm saying just broaden it just a tiny bit more, and to see how those other pieces, whether it's the analysis of the needs for the sports programs in the community center, how that fits in this as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanne. Lydia, you can unmute yourself.
Hi, thank you. I'm a resident. I live on Baldwin Street, so just 2 kind of blocks into Charlestown from this area. And I'll just speak personally as someone who both loves open space, loves greenery, loves trees, but also as someone who walks their dogs and their children down the path behind Schrapp's almost daily. Just access to the water, the ability to walk more easily, have more space to sort of enjoy and recreate it'd be so great. I'm just so excited to see this conversation happening.
Thank you for joining us tonight, Lydia. That's great to hear. I think we've also got Kathy Reese and Dan with their hands up.
Dan, you can unmute yourself.
Hey folks, looks good. My concern here, and I think Joanne sort of hit it right on the nail, is understanding what the kids need. As adults, we're solving that, but we're not really getting enough data to understand what things the kids want in the Ryan playground space. So I think that's something that we need to analyze a little deeper, from softball to soccer to rugby, and also look at other areas within the community for open space. Some of it could be temporary. It's not necessarily permanent, but as an example, behind the Spalding Rehab Hospital, there's a piece of land there that could be used. I know there's some issues with the land, but maybe combined with the Spalding, maybe something can be done there to make it a rugby field, as an example, or a soccer field. So the kids can take advantage of that. That would be something, not permanently, because obviously they want to be able to expand at some point. But for the time being, let's use the space instead of letting it sitting idle. The only thing I have a question about is along the hood green space of the rail space. Is the intent here to have a sidewalk per se that is on the side of the rail, so the rail itself is still protected, or are you encroaching into that D Street space?
I can answer that. As far as I know, it would not be encroaching into the rail space. It actually would be a separate path on the side. It would be separate from the Massport land.
Good, I like that, because I'd like to see the community pathway, which goes all the way around to 275, to maybe be part of this. That would be nice, because that way the community itself wants to be able to get down to Hood Green too, not just between the parks, but get to the parks. And I think that connectivity is sort of missing here along Rutherford, Bunker Hill, Medford, and obviously the community pathway. That would be beneficial. That's it.
Thank you, Dan. And I totally hear you about trying to engage kids and understanding what their needs are. We're going to be reaching out potentially to some school groups and trying to see if we can engage them, because sometimes people bring them to community meetings, but not often. And so it's a group that obviously they use open space a lot, and we want to hear what they want as well. So some great points you made. Thank you. I think Kathy also has her hand up.
Kathy, you can unmute yourself.
Hi. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm involved with Charlestown Little League. I have 2 comments to make. One is probably the obvious, that we really need an exit for cars from Ryan Playground directly into Sullivan Square, and hopefully that's part of this process. Currently, people turn right and head into Everett and then make illegal U-turns right after the bridge, which is quite dangerous. So if there could be some process to include an exit, possibly with a traffic light and a crosswalk from Ryan into Sullivan Square would be ideal. Secondly, my wish is that the developers in the area, which would include the Schrafts Flatley complex, the potential new project over, I think it's on Mystic Street, the Hood complex, that they all have, that they're all required to give something back to the community. And I know that they always say that they're going to, but what does the community need? And as a member involved with youth sports, I can tell you that all of our youth sports are dying for space. And whether that's tennis courts, basketball courts, indoor facilities, outdoor turf facilities, we need all of it. Our kids' programs are growing. I know Joanne made a point that soccer tripled in size. Little League has doubled in size as well. Now, all the programs are growing. And the great thing is that the families are staying in Charlestown and they're raising their kids here and they need facilities. So if there's any way to make part of the plan, and I hope this plan Charlestown has in mind to make these developers, provide some of the needed outdoor space or even indoor practice space that our town really needs. It would be nice if we could do this all, as one big planned project instead of saying, well, right now we're doing Ryan and Sullivan and Hood, and then later we'll do Barry, and then maybe later we'll include something with Schrafts, and then maybe even later than that we'll do something with the Bunker Hill housing project development. But it would be nice to have some kind of plan to come up with, a contiguous idea of space, outdoor space, including all these areas in town. It's only 1 square mile, but instead of doing it piecemeal, it would be nice to have an idea of what we need and then figure out which areas would be best suited for what we need.
Well,
Ted, do you want to jump in? Okay.
Yeah, maybe Jay, if you want to get a chance to reiterate, I think you may have missed Jay's portion in the beginning where he talked about how this is part of a coordinated open space planning effort. I think that may have been before you arrived. And also just wanted to note that to your other point about having new development provide new open space, that's a primary reason why the plan Charlestown planning staff are here from the BPDA. As far as we can tell, new development will be required to provide open space for the new people that it would bring to the neighborhood. So whether those are people working or living in the neighborhood, a good precedent would be Hood Green. That Hood Green is the open space that was required of the Hood Park development. Proportionately, we would expect roughly the same. So I don't want to speak for the process yet. We need to hear from stakeholders in meetings like this, but my expectation is that the plan will probably include something along the lines of the expectation that for projects the size of Hood Park, if it's providing that much new built area, it would require a comparable amount of new public open space as well. That's a good template.
But it has to be usable open space. So just to have an area to sit and relax is not the same as having, a large area for a soccer field or a baseball field.
Kathy, thank you so much. Those really great thoughts and comments, and I can assure you that we agree with you and kind of our mindsets align when we look at development projects. And every development project will have its own Article 80 process, but from the planning side, whether it's Ted, myself, Kelly, Anna, we work on the planning side of things, but we participate in all the Article 80, right, the development project meetings. So we're trying to amplify exactly what you just said through every development project. So as Ted mentioned, Hood Green is a direct, it's added green space directly extracted from a development project. So it's a great example how open space can be created from development projects. So to Ted's point, it's a template, it's an example. It's just how do we continue to ensure that we're extracting those public goods and public benefits that is meaningful for the community. So to your point, how do we kind of create active open space via development projects? It's something we'll try to address through the planning process and through ongoing development projects too. So we agree and we hear you loud and clear. So it's really great thoughts. We appreciate that.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
There's some other people who have their hands up, but just while we're going to take these people's comments and ideas, I want people to sort of be thinking, you know, the word cloud exercises that we did, the survey that we did earlier, the live polling, the word community came up quite a bit. And so like, what does that mean? You know, what are the things that you like to do in a public open space that could work for either of these spaces, these three spaces where you interact with your community? Like, do you like to go and have like a barbecue area, you know, like, or is it something where you'd like to sit next to somebody and both enjoy the same kind of event or show? Just be thinking about this and raise your hand if you'd like to talk about that or something else. But in the meantime, Tim and Dan also have their hands up.
Dan, you should be able to unmute yourself now.
Okay, I love this approach of having a dialogue. I like to see more of it. And I like to see something that is not necessarily open space, but collectively all of Charlestown of what our desires are. Not to say that they're going to happen. It's just saying, okay, what would we like collectively as a community for Charlestown? For it could be businesses, it could be industrial, it could be visionary, open space, obviously, transit. You know, we seem to always find compartmentalization of doing things. Plan Charlestown is a great start, but independent of that, there has to be what I call a 50,000 foot level view of Charlestown. And we don't have that. We don't, for instance, roads. There's certain roads that are in bad shape. They've been that way for a while. But there isn't, other than calling to the mayor's line and getting it in the eventual tick list. You know, there's got to be something better that we can do to sort of have a better understanding collectively of where things are going and how to categorize and figure out what needs to be done first. There doesn't seem to be much of that going on that the community sees. It's probably being done behind closed doors, but I don't think the community sees a lot of that. I just want to say that, you know, what I'm looking for as far as the spaces, I think Hood Green is a great place for quiet, you know, type of activities, picnicking, concerts, you know, things, you know, that are more in the quiet realm, because it is an area that's going to be quieter than the square space, or obviously Ryan is going to be noisy because it got kids. But the idea is that you have a place that can have more cultural activities. As far as Sullivan Square is concerned, I see that as a beer garden. I see food. I see picnicking, you know, being available there. Maybe having some pre-arranged grills and obviously some restroom or water facilities there. That would make what I would make that. The extension space, I think that would be very important to leverage that for the entryway into Ryan more effectively, as well as the transit in and out of Ryan for the bicyclists that are not from the community, but going through the community. We're going to have a huge quantity of transit by bicyclists coming from Everett and other westward spaces, coming through down the what I call the River Walk versus the Harbor Walk pathway, and into Boston, as well as down to the Navy Yard. I think that's going to be a huge draw for a lot of people to come in for work as well as for pleasure, as well as our own exiting out of Charlestown to go to the parks on the upper part of the river. I think that is a terrific way of getting people in and out of Charlestown by bicycle, because there isn't any real pathway without putting your life at risk. But the Riverwalk is the way in and out for pedestrian and cyclists.
And I thank you so much, Dan. I just also wanted to note that the Ryan Playground, Brandon said this, we will be coordinating with Sharaffs to make sure that our waterfront edge ensures that sort of seamless transition so that people still have unbroken access to the water at that interface. So those are some great points, Dan, and I thank you very much again for bringing those ideas, both about the regional considerations as well as the specific sites. I think that's really helpful. We also have Joanna's iPhone that has her hand up. So if you have some thoughts.
Thank you, I do. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I just in my car. Okay, thanks. So I just, Dan, you said a lot of smart things. The thing that stuck out the most though was that Charlestown needs a master plan, and Plan Charlestown, while they, promised to be that, have really fallen short. And I'm sorry if that sounds harsh, but I'm not alone in my thinking. And so then back to Joanne's great idea about getting more families to talk about what they want and, needing more space for soccer. I've got 3 kids who play soccer too, and I'm hearing that quite a bit. But I would suggest or encourage whoever's making these ultimate decisions to use grass fields, because turf is just plastic, and that's not very good for the environment, especially when it collects in little pellets or puddles of pellets like it's done at the high school fields that haven't been vacuumed in 10 years and are a full-on toxic danger to our children. So I would say grass would be a great way to not only give the children what they want, but what they need, which is an earth that can survive climate change. And then I have a question about the green and the hood green. I think it's really important, and I've stated this at other meetings, that it be grass where it's green and have real trees and not just saplings, because as we all have seen, if we're looking in the city and in Charlestown, is that the saplings aren't doing so well. And when they die, which they tend to, because we don't have any kind of real tree care program in the city, which is, hopefully going to change, they're replaced and they grow for another 3 years, but they never reach their canopy level. And so when people talk about shade, I hope that people are talking about canopy shade and not, awnings or umbrellas, because I think that's really what Charlestown needs more of. And, you mentioned the particulate matter, and then someone else mentioned tennis courts. And I just think it doesn't sound like a place I'd want to play tennis unless there were a lot of big mature trees creating some buffer from that particulate matter. You also mentioned that there would be a future hotel abutting this green. The green would sort of be the front yard from what I've seen in the pictures. How are the hotel guests going to feel when 50 families from Charlestown decide to have a picnic on the green? I mean, if we're trying to encourage families to engage and to be a part of this activation of space, we can't then also say it has to be quiet, because my kids aren't quiet. And so, yeah, I think these are things that are really important to be thinking about. And I'm glad that we're able to talk about it early on. I also just want to ask, has there been a shadow study on these 2 parks anyway? You talked about how gorgeous the sun setting on the west side is, and a lot of us would agree. Unfortunately, with the wall of buildings going up, we're not going to be having as much access to that sunset, especially in December, which is a shame. But yeah, so those are my questions. If you could answer them, that would be great. Thanks.
Thank you, Joanna. That's a lot of questions. I guess I'm curious about the shadow study, if that is a component, if someone from BPDA wants to share that information, if that's a component of plan submissions.
Yeah, I don't work in the development review part of the BPDA. I'm a planner, but the short version is that shadow studies are required. For what Joanna characterized as a wall of buildings, I think the only new development that has been reviewed and approved by the city is those associated with Hood Green. So if that's what you're referring to, there are shadow studies in their filing. So anyone that's interested in that can just do a Google search for Hood Park review or Hood Park and BPDA and look at their PDA development plan. Sorry, their PDA master plan. That's a plan development area master plan. So there's shadow studies there. Aside from that, there are developers out there that have proposals, but no other proposals that have been approved in this area. So they're still part of public review processes, and I encourage folks to attend those development review meetings when they're held.
Thank you, Ted. There are a couple of other hands raised. I think Tim has had his hand raised for a while, and then
No, Amber had it first.
Oh, sorry.
Amber, you can unmute yourself.
Thanks. I think Tim was before me and his hand went down and then went back up. So anyhow, I'll keep it short. My name is Amber Christofferson. I'm the Greenways Director at the Mystic River Watershed Association. You know, love all this discussion and the idea of bringing these green spaces together. One thing that someone brought up on one of the Slido questions that I thought was really relevant is there's a lot of density coming here. And if you're doing a per capita to acre, like of the parks, we might end up even having less open space than we do now. So I'm glad that the city is really thinking about how to capture open space from all this development, because I think it's just so critical. Like, cannot be overstated that all this development is going to come in, which brings lots of people, and people need places to go. They need places to get on foot and on bike. So it's just, I'm glad everyone's thinking about that, but it's a good point about metrics. And the thing I would say about turf, our organization has gotten brought into a lot of discussions about turf, particularly on the waterfronts. And we see the side of equity and the ability to actually have fields that people can play on, because as soon as you have natural fields, it's really tough to get the hours in, and there's a huge trade-off there. So we have seen some best practices around new methods of turf that does not involve the rubber crumb. That's also known to be toxic to fish. So and it's very hot. Like, they're actually hotter than parking lots. So I would say, like, if there is a way to balance turf, if it's needed, with more natural spaces, and like Joanna said, a robust tree canopy, there's a way to balance recreation in the environment. There's a few examples of turf fields along the Charles River that use a coconut husk and cork fill. So maybe slightly more expensive, but maybe worth it. And such a huge opportunity that Ryan Playground's happening first. Like, that's the big open space there on the water. So I think, while I appreciate that the city is trying to think of these three together, it's super complicated with Rutherford and everything. So try to get as much as you can out of Ryan and really make that space work, and then the others will kind of follow. So those are some of my thoughts, but I commend all the hard work, because it's a lot, and got to keep fighting for that open space.
Thank you, Amber. That's definitely true. And I love to hear, love to connect with you about your research into alternate turf solutions, because that is something that we always struggle with, the maintenance of grass versus like the perceived less maintenance from AstroTurf, and the heat island effect that's associated with synthetic. So those are all great points. Thank you.
And sorry to jump in, but just quickly to address the other part of Amber's comment about proportionate open space to people. So for example, Hood Green is intended to serve the people that come with Hood Park, in addition to the other open spaces associated with Hood Park. But let's say somebody else wants to develop a new building in the area. They can't say, oh, Hood Green is serving my new people. The way it works is, you have to do the similar thing and demonstrate that you're making adequate open space contributions for new people that would come in associated with your additional projects. So I'm just saying another version of what Jay said earlier, but Hood Green is to serve Hood Park, and then if developer X wants to do developer X Green, they would be required to do that as well. And that's why we're all here together with a combination of transportation department, the planning department, and parks. Thank you for indulging that essentially repetition of what Jay had said earlier.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks. And I feel responsible to say this given where I work, but really glad to see climate resiliency also at the forefront and something that we all agree upon. So it's good.
All right, I think patient Tim.
Yes, Tim, you can unmute yourself.
All right, thank you. And I just want to piggyback again off Kathy's remarks, and I'm sorry, B, for continuing to try and shift the focus on these calls, but I want to offer a suggestion that maybe we could follow. We talked about, these forums are great for getting, anecdotal feedback from the community. The survey is a great way to get, some quantitative, but still pretty anecdotal feedback. I think a really good forum potentially to work in a strategic manner is to create a subcommittee under the Plan Charlestown, specifically focused on open space, and get that kicked off ASAP. Because while we think this is going to be the first project, obviously in this space, as we know, there's pressing and already funded projects for the other parks that still have not been sharing with us in the community on timeframes and scope. And so I'm hoping as a follow-up here, instead of us trying to continue to push back on how it's really difficult, near impossible to say what is the best use of this land here, specifically in this corner of Charlestown, when we're not looking holistically at the needs of the programming for outdoor active space in particular. Like Kathy said, you can't just take Hood Green or any comparable space from large development. Those are just not suitable. There are very few spaces in Charlestown that can be suitable unless we go into DPA area zone, or unless you cordon off area in urban rural around Bunker Hill Community College. It just doesn't exist. And there really needs to be a comprehensive plan looking at the current needs and extrapolating that out based on population growth and where we think we're going to need in the future. So I'd like to hopefully see that we can get that done under the context of Plan Charlestown. And you know that I'd be a strong supporter.
Thank you so much, Tim. Nancy Johnson.
Nancy, you should be all set.
Okay. So I think the question I wanted to raise is again related to this ratio of open space to density in Charlestown. While I hear what both Ted and Jay are saying about new developers coming in and needing to provide a certain amount of open space for whoever they're bringing into the neighborhood, whether they're residents or workers or shoppers. I see Hood Green in part of Hood Park. It's a very large area that's been developed, and they were able to put together kind of a chunk of space, right? But when you're looking at the proposed projects, especially around Sullivan Square and along the Mystic River, those are separate parcels. Some of them share developers, but they're separate parcels. So I don't see how approaching this separately through the Article 80 process is really going to get Charlestown what it needs. So I look at when you're looking at the redesign of Sullivan Square, there's that development parcel. Honestly, that should be green space as well. And I think there needs to be, I echo the sentiments of those saying we need a more holistic approach to open space, because just looking at these three doesn't show what else we have in Charlestown. But it also, in thinking about all the different developers that are coming into Charlestown and proposing very large projects, and even if those projects don't become as large as they're proposed, maybe it's something about having them all contribute to buying that parcel, that development parcel, that it can be turned into more green space. I will say I'm fairly disappointed in some of what I've seen for Rutherford Ave and Sullivan Square. I like the what's happening at the Rotary, but it was a real opportunity to have something that was much more like the Rose Kennedy Greenway. And there is need for more green space along there, and suitability of use. If I look at 201 Rutherford that's being proposed, they're not really providing any green space for the community, and they've proposed building all the way out. And I understand that has not been approved yet, but I think there needs to be a better understanding in the community of what's available, and some more flexible and out of the box thinking on the part of the city and our elected officials in how we are approaching developers to make sure that density is not ending up with, okay, big building, little bit of green space for our tenants, and then lots of hot sidewalk and asphalt until you get to the next development where, again, little tiny bit of green space, because it's proportional to what Hood Park has provided with Hood Green. And I also think I'd like to hear more about how that ratio works with other developers, because I would think that given the area in Hood Park, that's going to be a pretty small set aside that you're asking for. So those are my thoughts.
Yeah, you're preaching to the choir, at least from my point of view, Nancy, that I think the way these problems should get solved is in a holistic way at a neighborhood scale, looking at open space needs on a neighborhood scale and also a citywide scale, and also looking at climate resilience through a neighborhood scale also. And so, I'm biased, but I'm a neighborhood planner. That's why I chose to become a planner and work in the planning part of the BPDA. So through the Plan Charlestown process, I hope to do that work. This is one of the first examples where before there was a Plan Charlestown, these open space discussions for these 3 open spaces that you see on the screen now were separate. And I would like, in my ideal world, we'll wrap up Plan Charlestown and have a template so that when development review happens going forward, it's not done in a piecemeal way as it had been done in the past. That's my bias and my goal as a city planner. I don't know, also, sorry, just one more thing, but any questions about the roadway itself? Bill Conroy, who's joined us from BTD, he's the real expert on that. He's a transportation planner. I'm a land use planner. So I don't think there were direct questions about that, but just want to note that Plan Charlestown is being done in coordination with Bill, sort of a hand in glove approach, so that Plan Charlestown and roadway planning that is organized by Bill Conroy work together in a hand in glove manner. But I'm not a transportation planner, so I really can't speak to any questions on that topic.
There's also a request in the chat if anyone has, here we go, Kelly Sherman to the rescue. The link for the 201 Rutherford Avenue project page is there in the chat if people want to take a look at that. So we're drawing close to the end of our time here. So I see Dan has raised his hand again, and we will certainly take further comments. But if anyone else has any thoughts that you've been sort of sitting on or considerations, if they're basic or complex, just please raise your hand, because we're drawing towards the end of our time here. So Dan.
Very quick, Ted, can we get a committee pulled together for open space as well as development areas? So we have a community group that dives into this.
I think that if we have everybody's contact information from tonight, I had put a request in earlier. If you did not sign up for the meeting with your email address, like if you did not enter that into Zoom, it won't show up. And so if you send me your email address, I will send out any further communications. If you send me information or questions having to do with BPDA, I'll forward that on to BPDA. The goal of tonight's meeting, in addition to getting feedback on these sites, is also to increase communication between our agencies and groups. So I don't know.
I'm for you, B. I'm for you for that. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the holistic, higher level, 50,000 foot level view of open space and development. as
Yes.
far as industrial space.
I think, but what I'm saying is, well, a response may not be like, yes, we can start that right now. So I'm saying we may need to communicate this after the meeting. And so if you give me your contact information, we will be able to reach out if and when something like this is set up. So
Okay, that's fine. That's
yeah,
fine. I just want to set the bar high here.
yes,
I want something going.
thank you. And we definitely hear that. It sounds like there's a lot of eagerness for communication and further input on greater planning consideration, both for active recreation and open space, transportation. So thank you. I want to flick to the next page if that's possible, Gracie. These are the email addresses for the team's project manager. I am for project manager for Boston Parks and Recreation, for Hood, I almost said, for Ryan. Long evening. We've got Jay Ruggiero for BPDA. We've got Bill Conroy for the BTD Rutherford Avenue project, and Mark Rosenshine. So copy these down, do a quick screenshot, send us questions, further thoughts on this if you have further thoughts after this meeting. I also, if we flick to the next slide, I want to give a quick shout out for this event that's happening. The Mystic River Watershed Association is also doing work with open space in Charlestown. So they're having their open house this weekend. There's a QR code there if you want to scan that for more information, but otherwise it's 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. You can go and contribute your thoughts and ideas and get connected with that group that does a lot of great work. If we go to the last slide, we have our survey. So basically the questions that we shared with the group tonight that we got the polling feedback on is also in a survey. So if you would like to further contribute other thoughts that you have, please take our survey. If you have any friends or neighbors who weren't able to make the meeting tonight, please forward them the survey. We're going to be putting the recording of this meeting on our project page, which is there on the right, boston.gov/Ryan-Charlestown. That's our Parks Department webpage. My contact information is on that webpage as well. So there are numerous ways to remain in touch, to be in touch. We really appreciate everybody taking the time to come to this meeting tonight and share your thoughts and your feedback. And it's always helpful. And I thought tonight was a great conversation and very productive. So I want to say thank you, and please stay in touch, and I hope you have a good evening. We're going to sign off. Okay, everybody take care and have a safe night. Okay.
Good night, everyone.